there's this challenging part of life. It's that life is like rowing in a rowboat. We face backwards and we row forwards. So we never see where we're going. We only understand the way our life unfolds after we've already gone through it. Our lives rarely make sense to us in the moment. We look backwards as we row forwards. We need the bigger picture so that we can have some distance from the events of our lives and take in the fullness of what everything means. The Immaculate Conception was a dogma that the church defined in 1854. Now, when you hear that, you may say, oh, wow, a long time ago. But think about that for a second. 1854. That was almost 1900 years after Mary lived. We were able to say, yes, she was blessed from the moment of her conception with God's grace. She never lived a moment without being under God's watchful care. It took us 1900 years to be able to define that. And it's interesting that Mary probably would have been surprised if anyone had ever told her that, just as she was surprised in tonight's story from the angel. At the very end of her life, it was clear that her life was blessed from the very beginning. But in the middle of her life, it appeared that her life was not blessed, but was cursed. I think that's because we have some misconceptions about Mary, and probably they come from seeing beautiful statues of her. The statue that we have is a particularly beautiful one, but of course most of us, when we think of a traditional statue of the Blessed Mother, it's a woman dressed in blue. She's likely to be barefoot, and she's ignoring the fact that she's standing on snakes. That doesn't seem to bother her too much. She is often doing something very curious. She's praying a rosary. Now, for those of you who pray the rosary and know the words of the prayers, that is an especially interesting thing to do. It must have been very awkward for her to pray the rosary. So we know that that image of Mary that we have is this idealized image that is very beautiful. It's based on our love for her and our piety, but it's not based on what her experience was. Because if that's what her experience was, then when the angel Gabriel came in her room when she was about 15 years old, she would have said, oh, well, it's about time. I was wondering when you would get here. Do you know who I am? I was immaculately conceived. Now, when am I going to start this mission? Let's get to work. But of course, that's not what happened at all. She was troubled. What are you doing here? What is this message? This makes no sense. I've never even had relations. How? Where? When? So we think of that experience, and then we think of the others when Mary might have not actually felt blessed, but may have felt cursed. Imagine God explaining to her, your fiancé that you love, when he finds this out, he's going to want to throw you away. But I'll deal with him. And you know this blessed birth I want you to have? You're going to be homeless when it happens. You're going to have nowhere to go. It's going to be filthy. You're going to be in a filthy barn for this. But that'll pass too. And certainly, when Mary stood at the foot of the cross, and her son was murdered before her, and then taken down and laid in her arms, she did not feel blessed. There was not one part of that day that would have caused her to feel blessed. But if she had given in to despair in any of those moments, she would have been missing the big picture. She would not have been living up to what was her birthright from the beginning, whether she knew it or not. During one of the prayers at the altar tonight, I have been instructed by the prayers of the church to talk about Mary receiving prevenient grace. Maybe some of you know that term. It's a very theological term, prevenient grace. And the word prevenient emphasizes that this is grace that you never could have seen coming. It was grace that came well before anything that you ever could have known or ever could have done. This is the kind of grace that predates before we ever did anything right, before we ever did anything wrong. And that's why we understand her to have been blessed from the very moment of conception. So now what about us? Are you cursed or are you blessed? God has chosen you and me for a special mission. We were born for this life that we have. We were born for these times in which we live, by God's divine decree. We wouldn't be here if that weren't the case. So we are called to keep rowing, even though we can't see where the boat is headed. It takes a lot of faith to do this, but only when we see the big picture, when we are with the Queen in heaven, will we see, my life has been blessed from the very beginning.